So, hello everybody, good morning, and thank you so much for joining this session. It's very early, and I'm very proud of you. I'm also proud of my co-panelists who managed to get up this morning and come here at 9 to talk about data journalism. And we are going to approach data journalism from a pan-European perspective. That means that we want to show how data journalism and data-driven storytelling can be used to run European stories that cover topics and issues that embrace different countries in Europe. And this happened 2 years ago. It all started, at least from our points of view, with the Migrants Files, a project that wanted to focus on the issue of migration from extra-European countries to Europe. So, for example, from Africa to Europe, and from the eastern frontiers of Europe to Europe. And another experience that actually started from a read of the Migrants File, and that is Generation E, which focused on the migration flows of South European young migrants who, from Spain, Italy, Greece, and Portugal, decided or were forced to leave their countries to go and live in the north of Europe or in other countries in Europe. From these two experiences, we had the feeling that this system could be systematized, repeated, replicated, and adapted to other topics, all of which have a European aura or a European impact. And we are here to talk about the future possibilities of this approach, to see and to explore any possible systematization of a pan-European data journalism methodology and publication system. Let me introduce the heroic speakers we have here. They all participated to the two projects I've just mentioned. They come from different countries in Europe. Here on my left, I have Katerina Stavruola, that comes from Athens, Greece, and took part of both the projects I've just mentioned, so Generation E and the Migrants Files. And she works for an independent radio as a freelance data journalist and radio journalist called Radio Bubble. You can find it at radiobubble.gr if you're interested. And next we have Nicolas Kayser-Bril from France, based in Berlin, one of the pioneers of data journalism in Europe, in continental Europe. And he's the founder of Journalist++, which is a network of data journalism companies based all across Europe. They have offices in Paris and Berlin, but they have also other offices around, so for example in Portugal or Holland and Sweden, and now also in Brazil, right, which is the new one. So actually they are expanding also outside Europe. Right after we have Daniele Grasso, Italian/Spanish journalist, an interesting case of migration himself, who is based in Madrid. And he's one of the first data journalists in Spain who started a data unit in a newspaper. And he will talk about his experience at El Confidencial, which is an online newspaper in Spain. And finally, we have Sara Moreira, a freelance data journalist from Portugal. She lives in Porto, and she has a long experience in the Lusophone world, so all the countries who speak Portuguese, which is very interesting. And she took part at Generation E as the Portuguese data journalist and the person who approached the topic from a Portuguese angle, as the others approached the topics from their nationalities, from their countries' perspectives. During this talk, I'll I'll go to the computer to show you some links of our publications, including the Migrants Files and Generation E. And the idea is that we spend some time to talk about our previous experiences, which are actually ongoing. So we already published some stories of Generation E and the Migrants Files, but both projects are continuing. This is an interesting feature of this kind of long projects that don't end with the first publication, but they actually continue over time, and they get longer and longer as we develop them. After the first introduction of the projects and the findings of the two projects and the methodologies and the ways we funded and the ways we approached the research questions, we'll discuss about the future direction of this movement of European data journalism. And finally, we'll discuss with you questions regarding the topic. So we will be very happy to discuss it with you by the end of this panel. So, I mean, thank you again for being here. I would start with Nicolas about the genesis of this approach, how this model of cross-European data journalism started, what is the intuition behind it, also what's the added value of such cross-data journalism projects. I'm asking him because as the founder of Journalist++, he had from the beginning a European approach to the data journalism development. So
maybe I don't know if everyone is familiar here with the two projects we did, Migrants Files and Generation E. So maybe we should show that in the video projector.
Yes, I'll start showing the links right now.
So, and as you set up the computer, oh, here it is. So this project, Migrants Files, as Jacopo mentioned, is an ongoing project we started 2 years ago. And can you show the map, please?
Sure.
Thanks. And what we wanted to do with this project was fairly simple. I mean, it all started by one single question. So in 2012, the Greek government built a wall at the border between Turkey and Greece because refugees used to cross into Europe using this route. So the Greek built a wall, and we wanted to find an answer to the question, so how many people, because of the wall, now come through the sea route, so taking a boat, and how many people die because of that. And so we started to look around for data to answer this question, so to find data about the number of people who crossed, the number of people who died, and we realized that there was no data. That no European institution, no international organization, or any member state was collecting data about the number of people, the number of refugees and migrants who died trying to come to Europe. So we decided to collect the data ourselves. And that's when we set up this cross-border team of journalists. So the way it started was through a grant from Journalism Fund, mostly. So Journalism Fund is a fairly small foundation based in Belgium that promotes cross-border investigations in Europe, and they are actually the only ones in Europe funding investigations, like actual investigations. So they gave us a fairly small amount of money, 7,000 euros, and with that we created like an ad hoc team of journalists in several countries. So it started with Italy, France, and Sweden, and then we realized that we were lacking a few countries, so we contacted Daniele at Confidencial, who accepted to work with us, and then we realized that we needed someone in Greece, so we contacted Katerina, and then we had a bigger team that was covering most of the interesting areas on this topic. The way we worked is mostly through internet tools, obviously. So we used Trello, which is a project management platform, and obviously Skype calls every month. And we still use the same methodology. So that's it for the organization. And you were asking about added value?
Yes.
So the interesting thing about the way we work, probably you guys are familiar with the work of ICIJ, for instance, which is another cross-border outlet. In terms of like the way we manage to do so much with so little money, is that we work with, like we are a collaboration between journalists proper. We are not a collaboration between media outlets, and I think that makes the whole difference, because we don't have to manage the overhead of talking to the bosses of L'Espresso or any other big media in Europe. So it simplifies the process. We also don't take care of translations themselves. I mean, everyone is responsible for translating. The actual collaborative work is only about the data and not about the final content. So in this way, we're able to bring costs down and to have very cost-effective investigations. The Migrants Files was published, for instance, in 12 newspapers simultaneously last year. We are hoping to have a bigger consortium this year, and I'll let you guys talk about Generation E because I wasn't part of that.
Yeah. So thanks, Nicola. So before moving further, I would like to show you a video that shows the results of the Migrants Files. And let me add that we also have here in the room another member of the Migrants Files, Alessio, if you can raise your hand. He was part of the Italian team with me. And because as Nicola specified, this project, in particular the Migrants Files, was developed by a team of more than 10 journalists from all over Europe, who coordinated under the project management of Nicola, which was conducted via a series of online tools. So let me just quickly show you a video. There is also some audio. Let's see if it works. Maybe we should activate. Okay, so this video was actually showed the first time during the celebration of the Data Journalism Awards last year in Barcelona, where the project was awarded with the Data Journalism Awards. Again, this year got another prize, the European Press Awards. This means that actually, it means many things, I think. But among these things, what it means is that this kind of pan-European approach is well considered as a necessity in Europe, apart from the importance of the topic, that is a European topic, an issue involving a lot of people from all over the world. Moving further, I would like to focus with Daniele on the other project, which is, I would say, softer in a sense that it involves people, but it doesn't focus on people dying, it focuses on people living abroad. So South European migrants who decide to leave their countries for many reasons. The project is called Generation E, and E stands for Europe, Exodus, Erasmus, EasyJet, email, what else? Emigration, yes, expatriation. And there is this controversy around the two terms, emigrants or migrants or expats. I mean, nobody knows if, well, some people believe that people from the developed countries prefer to be named expats and then distinguish themselves from the migrants from the south. We actually, as South European, feel ourselves as migrants, I would say, but we don't really see the difference. So we decided to use this E that embraces different terms and concepts. And Daniele from El Confidencial, I mean, it all started from a phone call 1 year ago. Would you like to describe the project and how it started and where we found the motivation and also how we developed it and what we found out?
Actually, it was a Skype call, not a phone call. That is an important...
I think it was a phone call from your office in the Confidencial.
Maybe.
Yeah,
Well,
but we don't say that.
Don't say it too loud.
Don't say it too loud.
No,
because it was an international call, that's why.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the Generation E project was born basically while both Jacopo and me were working on the Migrants Files project, and with this phone call in which Jacopo proposed this topic to dig a bit into data that can tell a story that is somehow my story and the story of a lot of young people from South European countries that leave their countries to go abroad, basically in Europe. When Jacopo proposed this topic, my first thought was that mostly in Spain was a topic widely covered by mass media, by every type of media. So it was like, okay, but how are we going to give another angle? How are we going to tell a story that nobody told till now? And I think that one of the most interesting parts from that point of view is that I think that for the first time, at least on a media, we find this European angle, giving this European topic a European approach. While we started digging into the topic, we also found that we had similar problem in our countries. And for example, not just the fact that people are leaving because of how the crisis hit all the South European countries, but also the lack of data that we have on that. And we get concerned of it also when we involve the two other countries, not just Italy and Spain, but when we involve Sara from Portugal and Katerina from Greece. So we have this South European perspective, and we have this aspect of the lack of data in all the countries, but in different senses. I mean, in Spain, for example, we have data on how many migrants left, how many young people left their country, but these data are not at all reliable. Mass media use it constantly without asking if are good data, because they are official data. So we, the media, normally use data without asking if they are reliable or not. And so we thought that maybe we should understand why they are not reliable, and to try to think of a methodology to get other data, so not just using official data. In this sense, we also wanted to fight somehow the cliché that there is some kind in Europe that Southern European people, lazy people, are going to other countries to, I don't know, and they are seen like a bad like just the bad part of this migration from the both sides, from the country that we are living, what I think from all the South European country sometimes is seen just as a tragedy that young people are living. We wanted to give also maybe other angles to this view. And also from the countries of arrival, where there are some cliché on the Southern European people that are going there. And we also wanted to somehow find if there it was a common narrative and a common sense in in this process of leaving South European countries to go abroad. So after we created the team, we basically choose the name. That it was not easy to choose the name for the project. That finally was Generation E, as Jacopo said, and we started each of us from his country, digging into the data that we have and thinking about the methodology, as I said before. And in this sense, an important aspect was the funding, that we had a grant from Journalist Fund too. That is the same organization that found the Migrants Files. And I think I answered your question.
Definitely. It's very interesting to see how the topic was perceived from the migrants, from the young migrants, from the young European migrants who we wanted to target with our campaign and with our survey, with our crowdsourcing campaign. And something that we haven't said yet is that we published these projects in multiple languages. Not only the languages that are of the authors, but also languages of the destination countries. So we published this project in the 4 countries in the south of Europe, but we also published the project, for example, in England with The Guardian, in the US with Vice, who got interested in the project, but also in Germany, which is a key country for this phenomenon. A lot of South Europeans live in Germany, and a lot of them have interesting stories. Some of these stories clash with the common stereotypes, and we could show, for example, that there are some Greeks in Germany who are creating jobs, and this goes directly against one of the narratives by some newspapers or some magazines, not only in Germany, but in all the northern countries, but also in the southern countries. There is this feeling of doing something wrong, which is controversial. I believe that it's not only that thing that migrants are betraying their countries. It's not only that. They are also contributing to create a new society in Europe, and they are learning languages, bringing their knowledge, starting new networks and relationships. Some of them start families who are the prototype of the European families, because children speak multiple languages from their childhood. But let's move further, because I want to show you something more about Generation E. And Katerina, you took part of both the projects, actually. You were part of the Migrants Files as well, Daniele and me, and Generation E. And so you know quite well the methodology behind these kind of projects, right? Could you explain us how we coordinated, and how we distributed the tasks, how we have written the stories? I mean, starting from the data, how we collected the data, how we distributed also the roles in the team.
Well, firstly, I would like to, let's say, gather the attention that these both projects were projects created by journalists. So that means that on the one hand, they were independent projects. The team had to discuss what they wanted to approach and how they wanted to approach it, without having an editor or a chief editor giving some instructions on what we want to approach. And secondly, the team had it also to decide how we would like to organize our work. At the same time, you had to have someone that would coordinate the project. So in both projects, we had like a project manager. In the own project, Nicolas was managing the entire team, let's say. In the other project, Jacopo did the project managing. Because we were an international team of journalists, of course, it wasn't possible to have like meetings in a common space or a room. So the web, internet was the main thing we used to coordinate and collaborate. Skype calls were the live, let's say, collaboration between us. We used Skype calls one by one, or team Skype calls. Most of the team Skype calls were like once a month, where we discussed how the project went on and what were the new findings and what we would like to do and how to continue. All the data and the information we had, or most of them, and the ones we had to translate, of course, because different languages, a lot of data in different languages, we had to let's say, decide which of them would be interesting for everyone to share. We used Google Drive in order to that everyone could see the different data and the different approaches. And the interesting part for me was also that we used Google Drive in order to, let's say, edit together even some parts of the written the articles, the common articles we did, which was something that I think it's the first time I participated in. Most of the things I do, I write them myself, and maybe an editor, takes a look and proposes changes. At these both projects, and especially at Generation E, we co-edited common articles. And of course, we had to use a collaborative tool in order to be able to see how the work was proceeding, and to also give ideas and share ideas, and we used Trello for that. Using a mail wouldn't be so easy at that time because a lot of people participated at the projects. In Migrants Files, we were more than 10 people. In Generation A, we were 6 or 7 people. So everyone had to see what was going on, and an email approach would create a series of email, and the work would be lost. So Trello was the best way to go. And then, of course, when you have a team of people that are trying to collaborate with each other and find approaches and be flexible and use the curiosity, we'll have journalists to propose things, then you understand that this is a part of the motivation that is needed. The other part of the motivation, of course, comes from the project manager, let's say. I mean, the person that will have to take a look at how the work is proceeding, and what it needs to be done, and if we are on time, on schedule, if there are parts of the process that have a certain, let's say, kind of lack in the work, and where you want to go from the work you already have. I think the project manager at both of our projects had a special role. It was a key role, but on the other hand, you never felt like you had a boss over your head, because it was, of course, a project manager, but it was also one of us. And in my point of view, that was let's say, a special identity of these both projects, that you felt that you had to do with people that understood the way you work, and that also had worked the same way before. I would also would like to contribute in this discussion by saying that it was interesting, in my point of view, that both of the projects were talking about things, were approaching things that were in the current discussion in the entire European Union. Both of them were in the current discussion in the south of the European Union. It was interesting that it was the first time that we had journalists from the south and the center of Europe trying to work together in subjects that no one really approached that way. So for me, it was mainly the main motivational reason that I participated, of course.
Yeah, I can confirm this, that these topics are actually in the center of the discussion, in the debate of many countries in Europe, but the public debate is fragmented all over these countries, and it's quite difficult to see a national media outlet discussing these issues from a European perspective. So I think this was part of the added value of our job. And this received the attention of the Columbia Journalism Review, which is a very important publication in the US about journalism and media. You all know it. As you can see, it was published an interview to Nicola and me about the methodology and this new direction of cross-borders collaboration in data journalism. This was also a nice moment for us to see that in the country of ProPublica, in the country where no-profit publications for the public interest are getting common, they see something similar, or they see something interesting from their point of view happening in the old continent of Europe. Talking about motivation before moving further, I would add something that we were, I think, all politically motivated to run these projects. This means that we didn't have a big budget to run them, and we probably spent, maybe without probably, we spent more time than what it was covered by the budget on the projects. In particular, the Migrants Files lasted more than 8 months. Maybe even longer. Generation E lasted 6 or 7 months with multiple co-publications. They are all still ongoing without budget. We are looking for new funds, and we are also optimistic that we'll find more. But the political motivation, in particular for Generation E, was due to the fact that we all know people who leave our countries. We all know how important it is to review the stereotypes around the phenomenon, and we wanted to hear the voice of these migrants. So that's why we created this bottom-up approach, running a crowdsourcing campaign. And among the results of Generation E, I would like to ask Sara to talk about the findings of this project and everything you think about it from your point of view, which is the Portuguese part.
Okay. Yeah. First of all, I can add something that you may find interesting, is that on the Generation E project, we started working together about 1 year ago, but yesterday was the first time that we met in person, at least except Jacopo, that is always going around. All the others had been working together in the distance, and we had never met in person until yesterday. So thanks, Festival, for bringing us together physically. About the results of Generation E. Well, I think the main finding, and when we published the final stories, was that roughly half of the people who participated in the forum, we launched the crowdsourcing survey to gather stories from South European migrants. We received more than 2,000 stories in the first person of young migrants between 20 and 40 years old who left Southern European countries in the last 4 or 5 years. The main finding was that roughly half of these respondents didn't register in the consulates of the country they arrived, of the destination country, or they didn't warn the origin country that they were going to leave. So we were focusing on intra-European migration because there is free movement, people can circulate, and they don't have to ask for a visa to go away. And we thought that the official figures were very underestimated. So we wanted to have an idea of the real dimension of this phenomenon, especially since the beginning of the austerity and the economic crisis in Southern Europe. So that was a relevant finding, to see that probably official figures are represent half of the truth, because the double of the people are leaving and they don't tell anyone that they are going. So numbers are very high, figures are very high. And as Jacopo was saying, this is visible for people who live in these countries. Like, everyone knows many young people who have left, and they are still, they are young, they are active, they are fertile, they should be part of the workforce, but they are going away to work in other countries. Besides that was one of the questions of our survey. We also asked migrants to tell us the reasons why they were leaving, and the big majority is leaving for professional reasons, of course, either unemployment or because they cannot, they don't find a career or a possibility to evolve in their career, so they are leaving. I remember in the Portuguese case, 86% of the respondents said that they left for professional reasons. One other question is was the intention to return? When are these migrants thinking of going back to their countries? And we got a very vague answer, or the majority answered that they hope to come back, but they still don't know when. So we would ask if they intend to return in the next year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, never again, or hope so, but don't know yet. And the majority answered hope so, but they still don't see that as an option. And what else? Yeah, then from our form, we also asked the people about their education, and the majority that answered had higher education. So we are aware that our study cannot be generalized for the whole universe of migrants from Southern Europe. Not everyone who is leaving these countries has higher education, but the ones who answered our form, the majority, yes. But that's also because of we used an online form, we published in certain media, so the people who responded were more prone to get to it. Also, the main destinations, the majority came from the UK. Yes, UK, from all origin countries. That's where we got more responses from. Maybe the article in The Guardian helps a bit having this, but yes. It also reflects the reality that from the official figures, the majority come go to the UK.
Yes.
I don't know if...
No, I mean, you've been very exhaustive. You actually can find all the data released in an aggregate form online. I'll share with you on Twitter all the links later, so don't worry about the long URL from Google Drive. We know that the dataset we collected is not scientifically proven, and we know that it's a journalistic project, but we also know that if we specify this from the beginning, people know that there could be biases, there could be quantitative problems in the data set we have published. Nevertheless, we believe it's useful to have a new evidence of what's going on from the perspective of the migrants. One of the things that we unveiled during this data journalism investigation is that the national institutes of Spain, Italy, Greece, and Portugal have a partial view on the number of migrants. And we found out that probably the double of them are not, like, if, for example, the Italian Institute of Statistics says that there are 8,000 migrants, there are actually more, like the double amount, because most of them don't, like 50% of them don't go to the official institutions to register their new residency, or if they do it, they don't do it straight away. And this actually was kind of shocking for us, because we believe that if Europe needs policies, I mean, wants to make support policies, wants to help the migrants, they first need to know how many they are going around, but they don't. So this one was one of the things that, one of the findings that actually send an input to the European institutions. Imagine this model replicated full-time the whole year, producing a number of investigations or publications or reportages targeting the European politicians, the European Parliament, or the powers, the national powers, calling for a European reform. We hope that this could contribute positively to the European debate. And this is why we started thinking of how this could be structured, systematized, replicated, and how this could turn into also a business model, and how this could, this challenge of creating a European no-profit, or even for-profit, but let's say a European no-profit media operation that revolves around the production of cross-European data journalism in the public interest. And so, future directions. How could we play with this new approach, which, let me say, it's very fun, and I mean, all of us are quite intrigued by the idea of continuing this approach. We all have jobs, we all have other activities going on, but we still find the time. Most of the time is like during the night, having Skype calls or spending time on Google Drive, like cutting out some time to dedicate ourselves to this mission. But I mean, we are trying to find a way to make it more sustainable, or at least theoretically, we want to know if this can get a new direction. And so the challenge of creating a European ProPublica, let's say it sounds ambitious, but someone has to say it, and we also know that someone have already said it. But Nicola, so from this experience of the Migrants Files and Generation E, yeah.
Maybe you have questions about the two projects we talked about for the last 30 minutes, because we've been doing all the talking, but maybe you want to...
Oh, sure. We have also some 20 minutes in the end to spend together talking. But if you have any question now, yeah, feel free to yes, please. Microphone, maybe. Please. Either here or...
Hello, I'm Dennis Redmond. I teach journalism at the Scuola di Giornalismo di Perugia. I'm American, and I've lived in all the southern countries during my career as a journalist previously. So I know very well also the phenomena that you describe, and I also went to school at Columbia, so I'm very familiar with the impact of your very interesting project. In fact, I don't know if you know, when Renzi went to London, Boris Johnson told him, "Welcome, Mr. Prime Minister, to the sixth city of Italy." And he said, "What?" And so even Renzi was not aware really of the impact that, I don't know, maybe 600,000 Italians, 700,000 Italians, maybe more.
More.
They all live in London. Then there's all the French neighborhood. Then there's, you know, it's like an amazing phenomenon which has been under the radar, and no one has really shouted that the emperor has no clothes. And so going forward then, my question is, are you thinking of perhaps Nicola will tackle this, but are you thinking of an observatorio type thing where you would constantly monitor this type of thing and give trends? And secondly, could one contemplate, instead of thinking of crowdfunding and foundation support or from public institutions, of mobilizing private companies? For example, in the food area, let's say, the Portuguese can eat bacalhau in London or whatever, and so all the bacalhau makers of Portugal would then, go there, or, I mean, this is, of course, already happening, but the idea to monetize some of this, Generation S, I think, is a thing that you should probably look at, because it will provide certainly more interesting funding than just public, and I understand the ProPublica model, but I think that perhaps I would like to know if you've started thinking about that, because this is a really interesting phenomenon, and that it's completely gone under the radar of most people, and yet in every single family in the southern countries of Europe, this is the conversation.
So thanks, and...
So can you maybe answer on the observatory part, and I'll tackle the private companies thing?
So what I wanted to say is that I included that quote from Renzi and Johnson in London in the publication in Italy. And it would be very interesting to see the real classifications of Italian cities, regardless the Italian formal borders. And yes, London is one of the most populated cities by Italians. One of the first cities in the world, which is surprising, but it's true. There are more than 205,000. Well, wait a second, because I don't remember the figures, but there are almost 500,000 Italians living in the UK, but only half of them are registered at the Italian institutions. So this was also interesting. About the observatory part, Generation E has a website, and is an ongoing process. So we would like to actually become the go-to place for this conversation. What we feel now at the moment, right now, is that we have focused on the data, because we are all data reporters, but we would like to focus more on stories, because there are very surprising stories among the 2,000 we received. We started this process with Correctiv, which is a German office of investigative journalism, that published 8 stories of Italians living in Germany and raised quite a nice impact, both among the Italian community in Germany and among the German community in Germany. It was published in 3 languages, English, German, and Italian, and we would like to replicate this further with more stories and more languages. We haven't thought about formally turning this generation into an observatory, but we are open to any kind of idea. We were probably more ambitious. We wanted to create something a structure that could involve Generation E, but also the Migrants Files and also other projects in the future. So that structure could include more observatories, not only one, a number of observatories, if you want to call them like this. But also a point where people can discuss. Yes, exactly. And Nicolas, if you want to add something.
So, yeah, I mean, on the observatory part, you're right that one of the main differences between these projects and a traditional article is that this never ends. I mean, as long as the public institutions don't do this work of monitoring intra-European migration or the fatalities of refugees trying to come here, we have to continue doing this job. On monetization, I think that the main problem, I mean, of course, this data is interesting. On both topics, we managed in a very short amount of time and with very little money to create the best available database on both topics. I mean, even if the data is not good enough, it's still the best there is. So it has value. The problem we have, you can see it here, none of us has a suit. the best we could come up with is a shirt that's worth maybe $100.
But we look good, right? I think we look good.
Yeah, we look great. We look great. But my point is, you cannot come dressed like that to like Eurostoxx 50 company and say, "Hey, look at my data; it's really good. Won't you pay me like 100,000 for that?" So we have a sales problem. And the thing is, we could raise. I mean, we would need to raise maybe 50,000 euros to hire a salesperson to make our case with these companies. But we could also maybe sell on the Migrants Files, for instance. We could have sold the data to the International Organization for Migration that basically stole it from us. I mean, they released this big report last year, which was 100% our data, without paying a cent. And I had to threaten them to sue them for them to put a link to our project. So my point is, yeah, we don't have the resources for that. And it's also like a sociological issue, because in our circles, and like if you take people at this conference, I'm not sure any single salesperson attends here. So that's the thing we cannot solve right now. So we need the help from incubators to do that. The problem is that you don't have incubators in Europe right now that focus on content. You have some in the US, but in Europe there is this big gap in terms of actual journalism. Like if you look at Axel Springer, for instance, so the biggest publication house in Europe, their incubators, they're starting to go in the startup field, and they're very successful at that. The problem is they said very clearly that they're not really concerned with journalism. So again, both projects were financed by Journalism Fund, which is this really small foundation. And as long as venture capitalists have no interest in the content industry, there is no way we can monetize that.
Now, if it's very, very short, yeah.
There are some sponsors here to the Journalism Festival, and some of them have some money, maybe.
Do you really think Amazon want to have its name on the map of the dead people who try to come here?
You have to think about the content. The content is important. I mean, it's not out of the blue that no international organization chose to monitor how many people are dying trying to come to Europe. This is an information that no one really wants to have. So,
yeah. But it's nice to have this conversation going on. I think it's constructive. And to move further, I would restart from Daniele, and then we go back to Nicola. Daniele, from your experience, why would it be great to have a European structure producing full-time or even more these kind of projects?
Well, we could write a book about that.
Yes.
But, well, I think that it's interesting that we are talking about that while we are seeing how in Brussels was born a couple of weeks ago Politico.eu, the European version of Politico in the United States. That is really, I think, somehow the first, well, they still do not start doing real stuff. They are preparing everything, but seems that is going the first media that is going to have a European approach to European topics. So this is quite interesting that something is moving out there, and it's interesting also that it didn't come from Europe. And I think that it will be great, basically, because we are talking about European topics, European problems, European issues, and we can't have an impact on them from single countries. We need to have European impact to have, and to have that, we need to have a European approach. I think that it's we were trying to solve somehow, both with the Migrants Files and Generation E, to have this pan-European angle, to also to let our reader or let the public opinion, if you want to call it like that, to see how it is a European issue. If we talk about migration just from Spain, Spanish people will see it as something that involves just Spain. From Italy is the same, something that involves just Europe, and then we have declarations from politics says that Europe must help, yeah. And so for this reason, I think also it's important to give the public this aspect, and give this type of input to them to say, hey, this is a European approach to have a European solution. And in this sense, I think that is something that no media is doing right now. So maybe it's a bit romantic to think like that, but I think that we need also to create like a European point of view on some issues, and that no institution is doing that right now. So I think these are the main aspects from a strictly journalistic point of view. Surely there are others.
Thanks, Daniele, and we agree with you. What we think, Katerina, about what could that outlet publish? This our dream. Let's talk about our dream. What could that publish and how? Relying on, do you think that it's a good idea to continue a collaboration with existing media who have a firepower and then can push the stories across their networks? Do you think that this approach of different angles for the same topic in multiple languages, co-publication system, do you think it's efficient? What do you think about it?
Well, I won't be in a hurry and decide if it's efficient or if it's the best way to go. I would say that it's a different point of view, and also it's a shift of paradigm. We don't really have that in Europe. It's very interesting to see the narration in the European countries. Most of the times, I think, if you read the international newspapers, or European newspapers, you understand that most of the times we have like a common narration but in different languages, and people from Greece don't know what the people from Spain are talking about, and people from Italy don't know what the people from France are talking about, because it's really fragmented. So the main thing that I think comes out of our, common work is that in the end of the work and the story, we understood that we have a lot of common ground to cover in both of the projects, and it also creates an interesting point of view to understand how, when you think, I could give the Greek example. If you talk about migration in Greek, both the immigrants or the emigrants, you understand that this is something that only Greeks are talking about. If you see the Greek newspapers, you don't have like an international aspect of what's going on. Suddenly, I participated in the journalistic team that covered both of these issues from a European point of view, and I found out that in both of these cases, we had like a common narration and a common discussion in different countries, but none of it was presented in Greece the way it should be presented. So I think this might be the main, let's say, dream I have about creating.
As ProPublica collaborated and collaborates with the National Public Radio, we could continue co-publishing with existing media such as L'Espresso, who have a long tail of followers, and this would help the outreach.
But at the same time, it would be interesting to create like a common culture between the readers in different countries. Mm-hmm. If you want to talk about a union, or the other hand, if you don't want to talk about a union, like a European
it could be thought as a hybrid between Café Babel or this kind of outlets, or Euronews, I think, that are trying to create go-to places for European citizens to discuss and comment. And ProPublica, one model doesn't exclude the other; they could be integrated. And Sara, very quickly, how do you feel about the fact that these projects are gold mines? In a sense that, we publish them, and as also the professor was noticing, we can't stop there. We should continue, and we feel like we want to continue. We want to create a web documentary with stories of South European migrants, film them, spend time with them, and show that all over Europe.
Mm-hmm. I think when we started crowdsourcing stories of young migrants, we weren't expecting to get to a gold mine of stories after 4 months. That's, as Jacopo said, when we were more focused on the data itself, like we wanted to understand if people are registering or not, where they are going, what's the reasons for them to go, but we also had an open field where people could share their story with us. And after 4 or 5 months, or now a bit more, I don't know, we launched the crowdsourcing form in the beginning of September. We announced it in different media from each country at the same time on the same day, and until now I think we have gathered 2,200 stories in the first person of young migrants. So we see ourselves with this huge data set with real stories of people who have different experiences and common experiences that of course we would like to be able to share. So one of our plans would be that, to transform the data set into a web documentary where we can give a face to the numbers and give a story to people who we select to show in the documentary. And there are other ways too, like if besides the web doc we also approach different media, because we noticed that, for instance, there are hundreds of stories of people who migrated because they had done an Erasmus program and then they fell in love and then they got married with the person they met and they moved to a different country. And this is a trend that we notice and that can be interesting for our media partners to publish series of articles on people who leave because they want to have babies, and in Southern Europe right now it's difficult to have the economic conditions to do it, so they go to other countries because they want to build a family and they cannot do it in their home countries. Yeah. And this could also be an interesting angle, approach. And
there are endless possibilities around this project, but let's spend the last 20 minutes for a discussion, unless Nicola has something to add about. Okay, so I saw before there were some questions. One there, please.
Hi, I'm Melissa Bailey. I'm a Nieman Fellow at Harvard. I'm just looking at your data. I saw the sort of spreadsheet that has the final data. Is there somewhere where it's all mapped? Or is there I saw sort of different coverage in individual countries?
So this is interesting from a methodological point of view. We didn't map it from a global perspective because we know that this data is biased. And it is biased because it was published by very strong media outlets in some countries and weaker media outlets in other countries. So we didn't want to push too much this quantitative visualization. We prefer to release the data set in a soft way, specifying that this data set comes from a journalistic project, and we recommend not to draw scientific conclusions directly from it. So that's why we haven't created an interactive map, but we rather created an illustration just to give an idea. And you probably saw it. It was done by a German illustrator. So you see that we would like to include also destination countries also in the production of the project. And this illustration is published here on, for example, here, this one.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next question.
Hi. How did you source the data for Migrants Files?
Nicolas, yeah.
So on Migrants Files, we used every single possible source of information. You had one NGO and one journalist who had started to do the same kind of systematic collection of all the incidents that involved people dying. So we took that. There is an automated project financed by the European Commission called Pulse, which is done by the University of Helsinki. They also had data. So we took that. You had other lists that we also integrated. So we took everything, we deduplicated them, And most importantly, we structured the data so that for each incident and for each person, we had every single bit of information, like latitude, longitude, name, age, gender, country of origin. We structured everything. And on top of that, we also went through news archive in the different countries to have as big a picture as possible. So that's one thing. And the other thing that we did that hadn't been done before is that we tried to estimate how much information we were missing. So if you have a shipwreck near Lampedusa, for instance, you will have a news article about it. If you have someone dying in the desert between Agadez in Niger and Libya, for instance, you're not going to have a news article about it. So we tried to estimate how many fatalities we could not document. And that's how we came to the estimates that we had in the end.
Thanks. Next question, please.
Denise, you had a question?
Thanks. I wanted to pick up on the we have a sales problem thing. I was in the session yesterday with the guy from Crowd Reporter talking about the crowdfunding, and it's so interesting how they, I mean, I guess those people, their correspondent and them, they position themselves as alternatives to an existing, business as usual system which is broken. And so they were able to, build this community around those values or that thing that people believed in. Data journalism, to me, looks like, sort of a bit like visualization. There's like a boundary discipline. And so you've got these two words, one is data and one is journalism, and it seems that both of those core disciplines that you're hybridizing, as it were, are not embracing you fully and giving you money in the way that you would like them to. And so then I guess my question was sort of like, if we acknowledge that you are the interesting boundary discipline for which there is no clearly identified market need from the existing community, like people are not going to say, oh, the people who do data journalism, in the mainstream way, the system is broken. And so we're going to go with this pan-European model, and that's the alternative, and that's the emotional hook, the kind of the marketing thing that brings people into the crowdfunding. So it's just a question. like what are the other communities out there that you're on the boundary of who would be more susceptible to embracing your thing? As opposed to, let's go to the media, let's go to the data people, for whatever reason. You're telling stories that people don't want to hear. So it's not an easy niche to crowdfund in that sense.
So I'm not sure I understood your point. You mean we should not focus on traditional media to look for funding?
It seems they're not embracing you. So that
yeah, that's true, but I'm not sure any other discipline does. The one people who like what we do are academics.
Yes.
We have lots of collaborations with them. The problem is it's not the kind of industry that has 100,000 euros to put on the table right away. I mean, we do collaborate with them on like European projects or whatever. Projects from the European Commission. But it's not the kind of seed capital that you need to start a bigger project.
That's why a model like ProPublica could work, probably, because they are non-for-profit and they have a foundation behind providing huge budgets that can be invested in this kind of projects because they believe in the political value of them and they are not looking at the marketing side only. But yeah, interesting, very interesting. I saw another question from the professor. Yes, please.
Just out of curiosity, could you list the response of the various countries and official as to, for example, EU, this was the response. Organization for MS, they're scared that you would sue them, so now what are they doing? Portuguese immigration authorities. So I'd like to know more or less the response to this from official authorities. Did they put their head under the sand, or did they try and chase you away,
Yeah.
or what?
Okay. So before redirecting this to Sara, because you mentioned Portugal, and Portugal is living in this.
Well,
Yeah.
this year is elections year in Portugal, and last month our government announced a new measure to bring back the migrants. Well, but it's.
But after your story?
After, yes, after. Well.
That was the response to the.
Well, you know, the problem is there, and the final publication was published by Público. It's one of the major, very big, the article had a big outreach, and I cannot say that it was because of our project that the government did this, but the fact is that everyone is talking about the migration issue, and our investigation had a big impact, I think, and now they are announcing, well, a new program, but the program is very ridiculous because it just affects like one in every 10,000 migrants. But
very quickly, one sentence. The University of Coimbra from Portugal got in touch with us and wanted to involve us in a research project. So you mentioned university. They would like to use our dataset to dive into this phenomenon. We tried to get in touch with the ex-commissioner for youth and education and multilingualism in Europe. We struggled to get an answer, and we posed 7 questions, and she answered only 3 of them, and in a very trivial way. So this confirmed the distance between European citizens and journalists and the institutions who have no idea what's going on, or they prefer to omit what they know to us. But Katerina wanted to add something very quickly on this.
I just want to make a comment on what you asked. In Greece, the Generation E-Pop project was also published by a rather small newspaper that belongs, but that is affiliated with the Greek left, that now is the government. The talk about the Greek migration towards the north because of the austerity, the crisis and the austerity, and also the talk about the brain drain became a part of the pro-election period. I don't know if it's because of the Generation E project or if it's something that it's very good to use in a period of a pro-election, but it's something that became a part of the entire talk before the elections. What I found out after the Migrants Files and also after the Generation E project is that I would be biased to say that because of our work things have changed, or European institutions have tried to find another way to tackle these issues, but there has been a little shift on, let's say, try to talk about how many migrants died. You have now some international institutions that are trying to count. I'm not sure that we will ever have a real number, because it's not like an information, as I said before, that people would like to have. And also you have the narration of the migration from the European South becoming like a broader narration in the European communities and the European countries. But I'm not sure that I would link that directly to the...
But we believe that this approach has more impact than a fragmented approach from the different countries.
I would,
and
I would say that.
Next, maybe we have time for another question, or other questions. So Daniele, would you like to add something about? We have a question.
We have a question over
so
there.
let's listen to that. And then. Okay.
You say that the data are not scientific, but in fact they are the most precise available, right?
They are the most precise data. Okay.
They are.
Daniele, you want to answer?
Talking about the Migrants Files or Generation E, or both of them?
Migrant Files.
I think that we always say that is the most precise. Well, it's not perfect, the database, but it's the best that we have right now.
Yeah, I guess that is a unique asset. Is a very value and has to be claimed as strong as possible, because it's something that is unique and not exist in another way.
Yeah.
So just a suggestion here to emphasize it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, thanks. What we think is that we should be very transparent from the methodological point of view, in a way that who will reuse our data that has been released will be aware of the limits and of the possible solutions and problems to be solved when using it. But yeah, I mean, also the International Organization for Migration gave us, I mean, took our data sets and used it, so it's considered quite well. Academics gave us a lot of enthusiasm, showed us a lot of enthusiasm. Next question. Okay. Daniele, you want to close this session, or how do you feel after waking up at 7?
No, I think that some interesting points were given more than specifically by you, with your questions. I think that we are in a really interesting moment for all these data journalist projects. Also, it's true that we have two big issues that are common to every journalistic project. How to have more impact, because I feel like we could have had more on both topic, and on the other hand, how we are going to be sustainable, and if it's possible. On this aspect, it's interesting that we have, previously we mentioned ProPublica, but we have also, for example, in the United States, there is ECIJ, whose donors are basically European. But in Europe, nobody's funding something like that. So maybe there is no market, maybe there is no interest. Well, it's interesting to start talking about it and reflect about it.
And if you're interested in following the evolution of these two projects, you can follow the hashtags or follow us on Twitter. But I would suggest you to follow the two hashtags, Migrants Files and Generation E. It's very interesting to see that people who are not part of the team are actually using these hashtags to keep the conversation together. So there is a sort of perception also outside in the audience, within the audience, and within other journalists who are contributing with links, resources, using our hashtags. This is probably due also to the fact that we co-published with the same name across the various publications. So we branded our investigations with a name that works well and it's easy to remember. Well, it's 10:30, so if there are no questions, I would say thank you. Thank you for being here, and this is it.